Hell is other people. You're sitting in a room, maybe alone, maybe not. But something shifts the moment someone else walks in. It's subtle at first. You become aware of your posture, the way your hands rest, the tone of your breath. You adjust, you perform, you exist differently, not as yourself but as someone being observed. You feel yourself become an object in someone else's world. Not just a subject who sees, but something seen. It's not just anxiety, it's a quiet invasion. Their eyes change the air, and suddenly your skin doesn't quite fit the same way. Jean-Paul Sartre named it simply, "Hell is other people." A phrase thrown around so often that it lost its sharpness. But this isn't about annoyance at others. It's not about crowded trains or noisy neighbors. It's about the existential dread of being watched, of no longer being the center of your own world. Sartre meant something deeper, something far more suffocating. The moment another person sees you, you lose your freedom to define yourself. You become who they think you are. Think about it. You can lie to yourself. Pretend you're confident, strong, detached. But when someone looks at you, truly looks, and sees fear, weakness, need, you feel exposed, trapped in a version of you that you didn't approve. Their gaze freezes you. It pins you down. You no longer control who you are. You're reflected, judged, imagined. And even if they say nothing, their silence speaks. Their mere presence reshapes you. You feel the weight of their expectations, real or imagined, pressing into your bones. This is the hell Sartre spoke of. A room with no exit, no torture devices, no flames, just the unrelenting consciousness of others. In his play No Exit, 3 people are trapped together in a single room. No mirrors, no windows, just each other. Over time, they begin to unravel, not because they hate each other, but because they can't escape the way the others see them. Their identities become prisons, constructed by external eyes. Every word they say gets refracted through someone else's perception. Every silence gets filled with suspicion. Every gesture becomes a trap. There is no truth anymore, only interpretation. And in the real world, it's not much different. We live in mirrors. We search for ourselves in the faces of others. We become who we're expected to be. We dress for them. We speak for them. Even our rebellion is shaped by the gaze we're pushing against. The teenager dressing outrageously isn't alone. They're counting on being seen. The silent thinker, hoping for solitude, still senses the invisible eyes of imagined watchers. There's no pure self left untouched by the world. What's terrifying is that this process is inescapable. As long as you exist with others, you are seen. And when you are seen, you are shaped. Sartre believed that we are fundamentally responsible for our own essence. But once someone else looks at us, they try to define that essence for us. We can fight it, deny it, but we still feel it. The feeling of being misunderstood isn't just frustrating, it's existentially wounding. Because in that misunderstanding, you vanish. You become a story someone else is telling. And no matter how loud you scream, they'll keep narrating your life in a voice you don't recognize. This is why we perform. We wear masks, not because we're dishonest, but because we're trying to control the version of us that others create. We curate our smiles, our profiles, our pauses, not to be real, but to survive. Because reality, for Sartre, isn't internal. It's negotiated, and the negotiation is exhausting. We aren't lying. We're defending ourselves from distortion. But what if no one was looking? What if you woke up in a world without eyes? Would you still be you? Or would you collapse into formlessness? So much of who we are only exists in reaction. If no one expects you to be kind, will you be cruel? If no one is listening, will you still speak? There's a frightening freedom in being unseen, but also a loss. Without mirrors, we drift, but with mirrors, we drown. That's the paradox Sartre drags into the open. We need others to know ourselves, but others also destroy that knowing. Their gaze confirms our presence but distorts our soul. And so we hover in a kind of hell, a hell of being constantly reflected, but never fully known. A hell where love becomes a negotiation, where friendship becomes a series of roles, where even solitude is defined by contrast to the presence we avoid. You might feel this most intensely in silence, when you walk into a room and no one looks up, or when they do, and hold that glance a moment too long. When someone interrupts you with a laugh that isn't about what you said, but about who they think you are. When you're judged not for your thoughts, but for the story your body tells without permission. This is the invisible violence of existence, the piercing, subtle war of being. And yet, we keep seeking each other. We chase connection, even though it burns. We long to be seen, even if it distorts us, because invisibility is colder than distortion. Sartre doesn't offer comfort. He doesn't pretend we can escape this hell, but he does expose it. He forces us to stop pretending that we're alone in shaping ourselves. He reminds us that even in our most intimate moments, we are haunted by the gaze of others, whether present or remembered. To exist is to perform. To perform is to fracture. And to fracture is to feel the weight of freedom, the freedom to define, to resist, to reject, but also the burden of knowing that someone, somewhere, is always watching, not as God, but as other people. And in that watching, you begin to disappear. You become their version of you, their snapshot, their fiction, and the real you, the trembling, unseen, uncertain self, begins to fade into the background, whispering beneath the noise of expectation. So maybe Sartre was right. Maybe hell is other people. But maybe hell is also the silence that follows once they leave. And you're left wondering, who were you before they looked? The nausea of being alive. You're sitting still. There's no danger, no drama, just silence. But something's wrong. The table in front of you feels strange. Not just old, not just dusty, unfamiliar, foreign. The wood has a texture that you suddenly can't explain. Your hands feel like borrowed tools. Your breath comes automatically, but now that you've noticed it, it won't stop. Something is off, something deep. Not a thought, a sensation. A quiet sickness rising, not from your stomach, but from existence itself. This is not physical nausea. This is metaphysical. Jean-Paul Sartre called it la nausea, the nausea of being alive. And it doesn't come from fear or illness. It comes from contact with the raw fact of being. A sudden awareness that you are here. That the world is not a story, not a dream, not a symbol, but something brute, unfiltered and unbearably real. And in that moment, you see it. Not beauty, not purpose, just presence. Heavy, dense, meaningless presence. The tree outside your window is not majestic. It's absurd. It grows because it grows. Its bark clings to it like a mask, but it means nothing. And neither do you. This nausea is not depression. It's not despair. It's not even dread. It's something more precise, a philosophical vertigo. the feeling that things exist without reason, and that you, as one of those things, are caught in the same absurd network of inertia. You feel exposed, not to others, but to the raw machinery of the world, the way a stone is exposed to gravity, the way a corpse is exposed to decay. Nothing holds you. Nothing saves you. You simply are, and you weren't consulted. Sartre experienced this through his character Roquentin in the novel Nausea. One day Roquentin looks at the root of a tree, and suddenly the world slips. The root no longer belongs in his mind's categories. It is not beautiful or ugly, useful or useless. It just is, repulsively, aggressively there. And with that revelation comes nausea, the body's revolt against meaningless being. We've trained ourselves to ignore this, to bury it under habits, language, purpose. But sometimes, just sometimes, the veil slips, and we're left face to face with existence, naked and indifferent. You don't have to be a philosopher to feel this. You might have sensed it late at night, when the world is quiet and the lights go dim, when your thoughts slow down and your body stills, and you realize that your room, your clothes, your reflection are all just strange objects arranged in a pattern. Or maybe during a walk, when the world suddenly looks artificial, like a set built for a movie no one is watching. Or during moments of happiness even, when the sudden awareness of that happiness reveals its own fragility, and you feel the nausea underneath. Because nothing holds, not really. Our jobs, our routines, our plans, they're scaffolding, thin structures we place around the void so it won't swallow us. But the void is patient. It waits beneath the surface of every normal day, every casual smile, every click, every breath. Sartre didn't hate existence. He just saw it clearly. And he wanted us to see it too, not to depress us, but to awaken us. Because in that moment of nausea, we are stripped of illusions. We are not students, workers, lovers, citizens. We are existence without excuse. And that's terrifying. But it's also the beginning of freedom. Because once you realize that life has no intrinsic meaning, you are no longer chained to someone else's blueprint. You are not here to fulfill a destiny. You are not part of a plan. You are not required to be anyone in particular. You are simply free. Not the glamorous freedom sold in advertisements, not the curated freedom of lifestyle choices, but existential freedom, the terrifying, beautiful, nauseating power to define yourself in a world that doesn't care. This is why Sartre said existence precedes essence. You are not born with a soul that carries your meaning. You are born, and then you make meaning, or don't. But either way, the responsibility is yours. That's why nausea is not just a sickness, it's awakening, a violent peeling away of illusions, the discomfort of seeing that the emperor has no clothes and you have no script, only presence, only choice. And yes, it hurts, it disorients, it dissolves the categories we rely on: good, evil, useful, noble, sacred. All of it starts to tremble under the weight of pure being. You begin to realize how much of your identity is scaffolding, not just masks worn for others, but fictions you told yourself to endure. And once those fictions fall away, who are you? A body? A name? A past? Or just an observer, floating through matter, crafting meaning out of noise? Some cannot bear this. They cling tighter to roles. They double down on dogma, family, nation, tribe. They scream at the void with rituals, with slogans, with endless distraction. But others, a few, they look into the nausea. They let it in. They accept the sickness as part of being awake. And from that illness, they start to build something new. Not a system, not a belief, but an authenticity, a life that no longer lies to itself. That doesn't mean happiness. Sartre was no salesman of joy, but he believed in responsibility, in the dignity of authorship. Even if the page is blank and the ink runs dry, it is still your story to write, and that is enough. So when the nausea comes, at 2 a.m., or in the mirror, or during a walk that suddenly feels unreal, don't run. Don't smother it. Sit with it. Let it speak. It is not madness. It is not weakness. It is the raw contact with the real, stripped of illusion. It is not pleasant, but it is honest. And maybe, just maybe, in that honesty, there is something sacred. Not in the world itself, but in the courage to face it, to exist anyway, to wake up tomorrow knowing it's all absurd and still choose to speak, to act, to create, to love, not because it means something, but because you said it will. You are not sick, you are awake. And sometimes being awake hurts, but it is also the first step toward being real. You are condemned to be free. You wake up. No alarms, no instructions, no system assigning your role, no divine whisper telling you who you are or what you're meant to do. Just the open, quiet morning and the terrible weight of choice. It sounds like freedom. It feels like air. But quickly you realize it's something else, something heavier. You are not gently offered freedom. You are condemned to it, cast into the world and told to decide who you will become, without guidance, without excuses, and without escape. This is not the poetic freedom we like to imagine. This is not flags waving in the wind or boundless skies. Sartre's freedom is a prison made of open doors, infinite paths that only remind you that none are chosen yet. Every direction you don't take becomes a ghost. Every decision you avoid becomes a lie. And every day you wait, the mirror grows colder. Freedom, in Sartre's view, isn't a gift. It's a sentence handed to you without consent. You are born, and that is the only thing you did not choose. Everything after that is yours. Yours to decide, yours to shape, yours to answer for. That's the horror. Not just that you have to make choices, but that you can't not choose. Even refusing to decide is a decision. Even silence is a statement. Even hiding is a performance. There is no neutral state. You are constantly creating yourself through action or inaction. And in that constant creation, you become responsible for the person you are, not just in the moment, but in every echo of your being. You are the author of your existence, whether you feel prepared or not. And what if you fail? You can't blame fate. You can't blame genetics. You can't blame society. Not fully, not deeply, because Sartre believes that even in the face of circumstance, we choose how to respond. And that response becomes us. The world might wound you, mock you, trap you, but your reaction is still yours. That is your freedom, and it is suffocating. Imagine standing before a blank canvas every morning. No template, no lines, no reference image, just the pressure to paint something meaningful, knowing that whatever you create becomes your truth. That is what freedom feels like. That is why people flee from it. We don't want freedom. We want structure. We want labels. We want someone else to draw the lines, because then we can blame them when the image is ugly. Then we can point and say, I had no choice. But Sartre whispers, you always do, even when it hurts. Even when you're lost, even when the world makes you feel like a puppet, you are holding the strings. And this isn't empowering. Not at first, it's terrifying. Because if there is no script, no essence, no divine plan, then the meaning of your life is something you must forge out of nothing. There is no destiny waiting, only possibility. And possibility can paralyze. So we lie. We pretend we are trapped. We cling to identities like shields. I'm just this way. It's not up to me. I have no choice. But these are not truths. These are escapes. Sartre calls this bad faith. The act of denying your own freedom by playing a role. You act like a waiter, a mother, a citizen, as if those things define you, but they don't. You define them. You invent yourself through them, and every moment you pretend otherwise, you surrender your freedom to fiction. But the truth waits, quiet and immovable. You are free, unconditionally, tragically, powerfully. You are not a thing. You are not an essence. You are a project, constantly becoming, constantly dissolving, constantly emerging in each decision. You are never finished. And that's the horror. That's also the hope. In this freedom, there is no place to hide, not even from yourself. The shadows you blame, your past, your upbringing, your pain, may explain, but they never justify. The moment you accept this, you feel it. A weight like chains being lifted, only to reveal the infinite gravity of choice. Because you now know, you are not a victim of existence. You are its architect. You carry this burden every day, quietly, in the way you speak, in the things you avoid, in the paths you delay walking, and the world watches, sometimes cruelly, sometimes indifferently, but mostly it waits for you to decide what to be. There are no instructions, no right answers, only choices. And behind every choice, the terrifying freedom to choose again tomorrow. So you hesitate. You wait for signs. You wait for permission. But none comes. Because no one can answer the question, who are you supposed to be? That's not written anywhere. It's not embedded in your DNA. It doesn't descend from the sky. It rises only from your actions. You write it with your hands every time you move them. You speak it into reality every time you open your mouth. You build it with silence, too. Some nights, this truth will crush you. You'll lie awake, begging for a map, a compass, a purpose. And all you'll hear in return is the echo of your own breath. The soft reminder that there is no one else here. Just you. Just freedom. Just the quiet terror of becoming. But some nights you'll feel the spark, the brief, flickering sense that your choices matter, that your actions carry meaning because you gave it to them. And in that moment, you won't feel condemned. You'll feel alive. Because in Sartre's world, freedom is not happiness, it's not peace, it's not safety, it's the raw, terrifying privilege of being the author of your soul. Every hour, every step, every sigh. And no one else can do it for you. So you are condemned to be free. But maybe, just maybe, that's the only real dignity we're given. The right to stand in the dark and choose. You don't want anything. The will wants through you. You wake up in the middle of the night, and there is a strange silence in your body, a temporary ceasefire. No desire strong enough to hurt, no hunger loud enough to notice. For a moment, you think you are free, but you are not. You are just in the eye of the storm. In a few minutes, the will remember you exist. It will plug itself back into your nervous system, flood your chest with restlessness. And once again, you'll mistake its whisper for your own voice. But it never was your voice. It was never you. You don't want anything. The will wants through you. Schopenhauer did not believe in a rational soul guiding the body. He did not believe in purpose or meaning or spiritual ascension. What he saw instead was a single blind force running through all of nature, irrational, eternal, and insatiable. A force he called will, not like willpower, but like an unconscious drive to be, to continue, to replicate. The will is not yours. It is what uses you to express itself. What you call your desires are just its projections. What you call your decisions are its movements. You are not the origin of anything. You are the theater. Look closely at any desire, any goal, any dream. Do you really want it? Or are you simply unable to silence the need? Why are you restless until you get what you think you want, and then empty again as soon as you have it? That's not how fulfillment works. That's how addiction works. And Schopenhauer believed life itself is addiction. You are not reaching for happiness. You are pulled. You are not climbing. You are being dragged. The will lives underneath your thoughts, before language, before logic. It is not interested in your peace. It doesn't care about your long-term well-being. It is not even interested in your survival, only in persistence, momentum, self-replication, and release. It is what makes the flower bloom, and what makes the animal mate, and what makes the addict relapse, and what makes the human cry in loneliness. It is the engine behind life, and it does not ask for your consent. The most dangerous illusion, Schopenhauer thought, is the belief that your wants are yours. Because if they are yours, then you must chase them. And if you chase them, you will be in permanent conflict. That is how the will sustains itself, through the struggle between hope and disappointment, pleasure and absence, boredom and pain. You think you're choosing your suffering. You're not. You're inside it. It is choosing you. And this is why, no matter what you achieve, it doesn't last. The moment you satisfy one hunger, another one opens up. The will doesn't want a satisfaction. It wants wanting. Its only commandment is more. More love, more sex, more power, more recognition, more movement. You're not here to rest. You're here to burn, to consume and be consumed, to act out this compulsion called being alive, as if it were your decision. But it never was. You didn't ask to be here. You didn't request this body, this name, this hunger. And yet you carry it like it's your fault. You feel guilt for not wanting to continue. But the guilt, too, is part of the will. It keeps you bound. It tells you you're weak for being tired. It whispers that you are a failure if you stop trying. But what if trying itself is the trap? What if effort is not noble, but automatic? What if motivation is nothing but a trick the will uses to keep you in motion, like bait on a hook? You think you are someone who loves. But ask, why do you love what you love? Why are you drawn to people who do not want you? Why does passion so often hurt more than it heals? Because desire is not here to reward you. It's here to replicate the will. Love is just another channel, a beautifully dressed compulsion, a biological strategy. You are not choosing it. It's choosing through you. There is no final goal. The will does not lead you somewhere. It just loops. You get, you lose. You hope, you fall, you move, you burn, you survive, you repeat. And when you are too broken to carry it further, the will passes itself on, into children, into memory, into the world, and starts again. It does not mourn you. It does not remember you. because it was never about you. It was only ever about continuation. And so Schopenhauer says, don't worship your desires. Don't believe they are sacred. Don't imagine your dreams as divine signs. They are symptoms. You are not free because you choose. You are free only in the tiny cracks where choice becomes impossible. In moments of stillness, of non-wanting, of surrender. That is the closest thing to peace this world allows. But how do you live knowing this? How do you look in the mirror and see not a person, but a channel, not a life, but a function? Maybe you don't. Maybe you stop looking. Maybe you sit still long enough to hear what's beneath the wanting. And maybe for a brief moment, something else speaks. Not the will, not the world, but the silence behind them. And in that silence, you finally disappear. Not into death, but into absence. The kind of absence that makes freedom possible. Because until then, you will not want. You will only be wanted through. The will to live is the true tyrant of your existence. There is a ruler inside you, and you've never seen his face. You don't remember voting for him. You don't recall the day he seized power. But he's there, ancient, silent, and absolute. He does not need your permission. He does not negotiate. He commands, and you obey without even realizing it. Every hunger you feel, every desire that tightens your chest, every fear that paralyzes you, it all speaks with his voice. He is the will to live, and he is your true tyrant. Schopenhauer did not see life as a gift. He saw it as a sentence, a chain around the neck of every creature, a force that drags us forward whether we consent or not. To him, the world is not governed by reason or purpose, but by a blind, indifferent drive. The will. Not your personal will, not something you control, but something that controls you. A primal compulsion that demands existence at any cost. It does not care if you're happy. It does not care if you're sane. It only cares that you continue. From the moment you are born, this tyrant takes hold. You cry before you understand words. You reach before you understand meaning. You want before you understand yourself. The will has already entered, and it will not let go until your last breath. Even then, it survives, in others, in memory, in movement. It does not die with you. You are just its temporary vessel, a brief flare in its long procession. Everything you do is shadowed by this tyrant. You eat because he demands it. You run from danger because he commands it. You fall in love because he whispers that survival needs it. You build, you hoard, you compete, you destroy. Not because you want to, but because he wills it through you. You are not his subject. You are his mask. And what makes him a tyrant is not just control. It's the illusion of freedom. You think you are making choices. You think your dreams are yours. But look deeper. Why do you fear death so much? Why does pain shut down your body? Why does your skin crawl at emptiness, at failure, at loss? Because the will has hardwired suffering into you. It uses pain as a cattle prod and pleasure as a trick. You move between them like a prisoner between beatings and bribes. Even your hope is a leash. The idea that life might get better is not truth. It is bait. The will dangles it to keep you crawling. Tomorrow, next month, next year, maybe then you'll be happy. But tomorrow never arrives the way you imagine. And if it does, it dissolves instantly. You're back to hunger, back to needing, back to more. And still you keep going. You tell yourself it's noble to endure, that suffering builds character, that struggle means meaning. But these are just myths the tyrant allows to keep you docile, to keep you from revolting. He lets you decorate your cage, but not leave it. He lets you name your chains, but not remove them. What's most cruel is that the will never rests. Sleep is not peace, it's maintenance. Rest is not freedom, it's just the minimum required to keep you useful. Even in your dreams, the will speaks. It shows you fears, it shows you desires. It runs its programs in the background, like a parasite updating its script. And when you are too tired to obey, the will does not pity you. It does not step back. It punishes you with depression, with emptiness, with existential dread. These are not signs of brokenness. They are symptoms of resistance. They are what happens when the slave begins to see the master. Some try to rebel. They isolate. They starve themselves. They retreat into silence, into art, into numbness. Some even consider the final revolt, ending it all. But even that act is infected by the will. Because the desire to escape is still a desire, and desire is his territory. So is there no way out? Schopenhauer's answer was bleak, but not empty. He believed that the only escape, however partial, was through denial of the will. Not in destruction, but in quiet refusal. In turning away from the game. In stepping out of the race. In no longer believing the lie that you must want, must chase, must win. This is not surrender. It is subtraction. It is subtraction of illusion, of obligation, of noise. In art, in contemplation, in certain rare moments of stillness, the will fades. You are not free, but you are no longer being used. You are not happy, but you are no longer chasing happiness like a dog chases a shadow. And in that stillness, you may feel something terrifying and pure. Not joy, not hope, but silence. The silence of a world that has stopped commanding. The silence of your own being, not pulled in any direction. For a moment, you are no longer the mask. You are the emptiness beneath it. But this silence does not last. The tyrant always returns. He always finds a new disguise, a new hunger, a new reason to continue. Because that is what he is, the machinery of continuation. He cannot understand stopping. He cannot tolerate it. That's why even in despair, you keep breathing. Even in disgust, you keep looking. Even in futility, you keep going. The will is not evil. Evil requires intention. The will has no intention. It only has momentum. That's what makes it worse than evil. You cannot argue with it. You can only recognize it. And once you do, the world changes shape. What once looked like purpose now looks like machinery. What once felt like destiny now feels like gravity. And yet this vision is not despairing. It is clarifying. You begin to see the bars of your cage, and that is the first step towards stepping beyond it. Not into happiness, not into salvation, but into awareness, into lucidity, into the cold, strange freedom of a mind that no longer lies to itself. Because the will to live is the tyrant of your existence. But even a tyrant loses power once he is named. Consciousness is just the mirror of suffering. You open your eyes, not to light, not to beauty, but to demand. The moment you wake, the world floods back in. What must be done, what still hurts, what didn't go away overnight. And behind it all, the quiet ache of simply being aware. You are conscious again, and that means you are suffering again. Schopenhauer believed that consciousness is not a gift, but a curse. It is not the light that lifts you. It is the mirror that reflects everything you cannot escape. The more you see, the more you feel. And the more you feel, the more you suffer. Pain is not an accident of consciousness. It is its very substance. You are not aware despite suffering. You are aware through it. You think you are conscious so you can make sense of the world. But the world doesn't care. It has no interest in being understood. Your mind is not a compass. It is a screen, constantly showing you how little you control, how deeply you hurt, how far you are from peace. Even your most elevated thoughts are soaked in the anxiety of your body. You cannot think without the pulse of hunger, the shadow of fear, the itch of desire. The mind does not rise above the body. It is chained to it. And every moment of awareness is a moment of being reminded. This is what makes suffering different from pain. Pain is physical. Suffering is the mind watching pain and realizing it cannot do anything. Consciousness adds the unbearable dimension: memory, anticipation, analysis, blame. You are not just hurt. You are aware that you are hurt, that you have been hurt, that you will be hurt again. You relive it, you predict it, you personalize it, you become it. And this is why animals suffer less. Not because they are less alive, but because they are less conscious. They feel pain, yes, but they do not build stories around it. They do not ask why. They do not project meaning onto every bruise. But you do. You are the storytelling animal. And every story begins and ends with, why does it hurt? There is no escape in intelligence. In fact, Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent you are, the more deeply you suffer. Because you see more. You cannot look away. You cannot pretend. Stupidity protects with blindness. Intelligence tortures with clarity. And the mind, once open, cannot be closed again. You cannot unsee your own fragility. You cannot unlearn your own futility. You carry it everywhere. Even beauty becomes a wound. You see something breathtaking, a landscape, a face, a moment. And instead of being lifted, you feel the ache. Because it won't last. Because you can't keep it. Because even the most perfect instant is already falling away. Consciousness is not just the mirror of pain. It is the mirror of passing. Everything you see, you also lose. And when you try to numb it, with noise, with consumption, with stimulation, the mirror fogs for a while. But the outline is still there, the shape of what hurts, the reflection of what chases you. And the moment the noise fades, the clarity returns. You are still here. You are still you. You are still inside this machine that cannot stop reflecting the unbearable. Sleep is the only time the mirror dims. But even then, the mind flickers. Dreams echo the day's pain in cryptic loops. Nightmares show you what you feared to feel. The will, that blind force beneath everything, uses consciousness as a tool. It keeps you aware just enough to keep you running, to keep you solving, to keep you moving, but never resting, never resolving. And what of joy? Schopenhauer believed joy is not real, only the temporary relief from wanting. When the pressure of the will briefly lifts, you feel light. But not because you are full, only because the hunger stopped squeezing. The default state is unrest. Joy is a glitch, not a state. And even that glitch is observed, measured, dissected by the mirror of consciousness. So what is the alternative? Would you trade awareness for peace? Would you give up your mind to escape your pain? And if so, who is making that trade? Who remains? The paradox of consciousness is that it cannot destroy itself without knowing it is destroying itself. Suicide, too, is an act of reflection. Even the will to end it all is still a function of the mind's unbearable clarity. Some try to silence the mirror, through meditation, through stillness, through withdrawal, and sometimes, briefly, it works. The mind quiets, the body softens, the reflection dims, but it always returns, because consciousness is not an overlay, it is the thing itself. You cannot silence it. You are it. Art perhaps offers the most honest mirror. It does not promise escape. It does not deny suffering. It reflects it with precision, with elegance, with dignity. Schopenhauer believed that art allows us to see the will without being driven by it. A moment of awareness that is not hungry, not afraid, not chasing, just seeing, noticing, and in that, a strange kind of peace, not from what is shown, but from how it is shown, not in forgetting, but in holding. You will continue to suffer. The mirror will remain. But maybe you can look into it without flinching. Maybe you can see the pain and say, yes, that is me. And also, that is not all I am. Because even if consciousness is a mirror of suffering, it is still a mirror. And in it, if you look carefully, you might catch a glimpse of something else. Something behind the pain, not hope, not meaning, but stillness. And in that stillness, you do not escape the world, but you are no longer swallowed by it. You are not saved, but you are not lost. You are aware, and for now, that is enough. Love is not romantic. It's a strategy of the will. You think you're in love. You feel the pull, the tremble, the ache. You believe it is yours, this yearning, this fire. You think you chose it, that it emerged from your heart, your soul, your preferences, your story. But what if you're wrong? What if what you call love is not yours at all? What if it never was? Schopenhauer believed that love is not romantic. It is not a poetic miracle, not a spiritual recognition, not a divine connection. It is a biological trick, a trap, a strategy of the will, that blind, insatiable force that drives all living things to persist, to reproduce, to continue. The will doesn't care if you are happy. It only cares that you are used, that your body plays its part in the endless machinery of life. And so it dresses up its compulsion in beautiful language. It seduces you with illusion. It calls itself love. But look closer. Why do you fall for certain people and not others? Why does attraction strike without warning, without logic, without control? Why do you long for those who wound you, chase those who reject you, ache for those who unravel you? Because it is not you choosing, it is the will selecting, through your genes, your hormones, your instincts, the best possible match for its own reproduction. Not your happiness, its continuation. You say, but I feel love. I feel it deeply. Of course you do. The will needs you to. If it didn't feel overwhelming, you wouldn't obey. If it didn't feel sacred, you might resist. But the depth of a feeling does not prove its origin. Desperation does not mean destiny. Longing does not mean truth. Pain can be just as programmed as pleasure. Think of the madness that love provokes, the obsession, the sacrifice, the jealousy, the despair. Why would something truly human, truly elevated, cause such collapse? Why does it degrade you, consume you, control you? Because its purpose is not noble. It is not about connection. It is about continuation. The will wants bodies to merge, genes to combine, children to be born. Everything else, romance, poetry, ecstasy, is decoration. And yet, we cling to it. We crave love more than anything, because the will uses our loneliness as leverage. It makes isolation unbearable, so that the first touch, the first gaze, feels like salvation. But it's not salvation. It's submission. You are not being rescued. You are being recruited. And once you are inside, once you are in love, you are no longer free. You are moved. You are manipulated. You are used. This is why so many loves end in silence, in pain, in confusion. Because once the will achieves its goal, once the biological imperative is satisfied or failed, it withdraws. The fire dies. The magic fades. And you are left wondering what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. The will is just finished with you. For now. Even the romantic ideals, monogamy, fidelity, devotion, are illusions. The will doesn't care about loyalty. It only cares about variation, replication, survival. It has no ethics, no aesthetics, only needs. And it will use any story, any culture, any myth to meet them. You are told love is sacred, that it gives life meaning, that it is what makes us human. But what if the opposite is true? What if love is what binds us most deeply to the animal, the automatic, the unconscious? What if love is the most profound form of biological obedience? This does not mean love is false. Schopenhauer never said that. He said it is real, terrifyingly real, but not for the reasons you think. It is real the way a storm is real, a fever, a compulsion, something that uses you more than you use it, something that burns you from within because it is not you. It is something ancient speaking through your blood. And this is why love hurts, not because it fails, but because it succeeds at overriding you. The will does not ask, it moves. And when you resist, it punishes, with longing, with emptiness, with that unbearable sense of missing something essential. But what you're missing is not a person. It is a narrative, a function, a role you were told would complete you. But no role completes, only silences. Briefly, some try to transcend it, to love purely, without desire, without ownership, without need. But even that is still touched by the will. The need to escape it is still a need. The mind cannot cleanly separate itself from the body. The heart cannot stop beating just because you understand what a heart is. But there is a way to see love clearly, not to destroy it, but to witness it, to notice its mechanisms, its timings, its deceptions, to see the way it moves through you, speaks through you, pretends to be you. And in that witnessing, there is a kind of dignity, a kind of peace, not the peace of romance, but the peace of knowing, of no longer being fooled. And in that clarity, you might still love, but differently, not as someone captured, but as someone awake, not as a puppet of the will, but as its mirror. Because in the end, love is not romantic. It is the oldest command, the deepest trick, the will in disguise. And once you see that, you are no longer just in love. You are in truth. You are a prisoner of endless wanting. You want something right now. Even as you sit still, even as you breathe quietly, even as nothing stings or bleeds, you still want. Maybe you can't name it. Maybe it's not urgent, but it's there. A pull behind your chest, a restlessness behind your thoughts, a craving that hums just beneath awareness. You think you're alive because you exist. But Schopenhauer would say, You are alive because you want, and that is not freedom. That is captivity. To live is not to possess desire, it is to be possessed by it. From the moment you are born, you are thrown into the machinery of lack, hunger before words, pain before thought, need before identity, and it never ends. You crawl toward warmth, toward taste, toward touch, then toward approval, then toward achievement, then toward meaning, and each time you grasp it, it slips away or turns to ash. So you start again. Schopenhauer called this condition the curse of the will. Not your will, not a noble force, but a blind, aimless drive that animates everything, plants, animals, humans. The will wants to continue itself. It uses you to do that, and it ensures that you are never satisfied, because satisfaction would mean rest, and rest would mean stillness, and stillness is the enemy of continuation. So you are kept in motion, not by purpose, not by logic, but by endless deficit. The moment you fill one hole, another opens. You chase success and feel empty. You chase connection and feel trapped. You chase pleasure and feel hollow. And then you convince yourself, the next thing will be different. But it never is. Even joy betrays you. The peak of love, of triumph, of beauty, it fades too fast, and in its absence the ache returns. You remember how it felt. You compare the present to that moment. You crave its return. The past becomes another hunger. The future becomes bait. The present becomes starvation. And all of this, all of it, is what the will wants. It does not want you to be well. It wants you to move, to reach, to want. That is how it spreads. That is how it survives. You are not a self. You are a conduit. A mechanism of desire wrapped in skin and memory and name. This is why boredom feels like death. When you are not distracted, not chasing, not consumed, you feel the abyss, the silence beneath all the wanting, and it terrifies you, so you fill it with noise, with goals, with people, with anything. Because if you stop wanting, you might see the truth, that you are not living your life. You are being lived by it. Schopenhauer did not offer comfort. He said, existence swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. Pain when you lack, boredom when you have. Either you suffer from needing or suffer from having nothing left to need. And even the rare moments of peace are nothing but transitions between the two. You are told to dream big, to follow your heart, to believe in the journey. But no one tells you that the journey is circular, that the road folds back onto itself, that every achievement becomes the new baseline, that happiness, once reached, resets the scale. You are never full. You are just temporarily less hungry. And this isn't a flaw. It's the system. The will made it that way. Because if you were ever truly satisfied, you would stop. And stopping is death to the will. So it protects itself by making satisfaction impossible. Even selflessness, even compassion, even transcendence, the will finds ways to corrupt them. You help others but want recognition. You give but secretly crave being needed. You meditate but hope it leads somewhere. Wanting hides inside everything, like water soaking every crack. So what are you supposed to do? How do you live with this knowledge that you are a prisoner of desire and your jailer lives inside your own ribs? Schopenhauer suggested one answer: negation, not destruction, not rebellion, but refusal. The quiet act of not chasing, not indulging, not believing the lie that more is better, that the next thing will heal you, that wanting is proof of life. He pointed to art, to contemplation, to asceticism, not as escapes, but as glimpses. Glimpses of what it feels like to exist without reaching. When you are absorbed in music, in a painting, in a moment of wordless stillness, the will quiets. For a second, you are not desiring. You are not lacking. You are just there, watching, listening, being, and then the will returns. But now you've seen behind the curtain. That glimpse changes you. You no longer believe every urge. You no longer worship every craving. You recognize the pattern, the trap. And while you may still want, because the will is strong, you are no longer fooled. You become a witness to your own wanting, and that is the beginning of distance, not freedom, but clarity. And in clarity there is space, and in space there is breath. You are still a prisoner, but now you know the walls. And sometimes, just sometimes, you can feel the air outside them. Why you'll never be what you pretend to be. You tell yourself you're fine. You tell the world you're confident, calm, collected. You wear the right clothes. You smile the right smile. You speak the words that match the version of you you've rehearsed in mirrors, in dreams, in fears. And for a moment, it works. People believe you. You even believe yourself. But then it cracks, in silence, in solitude, in those long seconds when no one's watching. You realize you're playing a role. You always were, and worse, the role starts playing you. Sartre called this bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves to avoid the terror of freedom. It's not ordinary lying. It's lying to yourself about who you are, pretending that you are a fixed thing, a stable identity, a someone with essence written in stone. You pretend to be a student, a parent, a lover, a success, a failure, as if these roles explain you, as if they are you. But you're not any of them. You're not even a thing. You are becoming. And every time you pretend to be otherwise, you betray yourself. You can feel it. The tightness in your chest when someone calls you something you don't fully believe. The nausea when your performance no longer matches your inner voice. The suffocation of being treated like a role instead of a person. You might laugh, you might nod, you might keep playing, but something inside is screaming, "That's not me. I'm not that. I don't know what I am, but I know this mask is suffocating." The problem isn't that we lie. Everyone lies. The problem is that we forget. We forget that the lie is a costume, not a face. We wear it too long. We fall asleep in it. We become it. And then we are lost. Sartre watched people become their roles. The waiter who isn't just working, but is a waiter, mimicking the motions with mechanical precision, acting as if his being is defined by the tray he carries. But this isn't limited to restaurants. We all do it. The influencer who becomes the brand, the rebel who becomes the label, the lover who becomes the performance of love. We don't just pretend, we invest. And soon we forget we're pretending. But deep down, something remains. A flicker, a tension, a resistance. That flicker is you. Not the you they see, not the you sell, but the formless, terrifying, restless thing inside, the consciousness that refuses to sit still. You'll never be what you pretend to be because you are not being. You are becoming. And becoming doesn't end. It doesn't hold still. It doesn't settle into neat roles. It moves. It slips. It contradicts itself. But we hate contradiction. We crave simplicity. This is who I am. That's just how I work. I'm the kind of person who... But none of it's true. You weren't born with a label. You weren't assigned a purpose. You weren't written in a book. You are not a noun. You are a verb. To live is to change. to choose, to fail, to try again, to undo, to remake. But the world doesn't reward that. The world likes statues, and so we freeze, we pose, we become images instead of beings. And that's where the sickness begins. The silent, aching sense that you're living someone else's life, that your words aren't yours, that your laughter is hollow, that your reflection is unfamiliar. You're acting, not on a stage, but in your own skin. And no one claps at the end. They just expect more roles, more consistency, more of the mask they've come to recognize. But what happens if you drop it? If you stop pretending? People will look confused. Some will walk away. You'll feel naked, uncertain, weak, but also real. Because even if the mask protects you, it also buries you. It keeps you safe by keeping you silent. And your silence becomes your prison. Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that there is no essence, no fate, no script, only choices. And with each choice we define ourselves, not once, not forever, but again and again. So pretending isn't just dishonest, it's a form of self-erasure. Every time you perform instead of choose, you disappear a little. And soon you forget what choosing even felt like. You become a job, a profile, a habit. You smile on cue. You speak in algorithms. You laugh in echo. You exist, but you don't live. And that emptiness, that low, humming nausea, it grows. It waits in mirrors, in dreams, in moments of stillness. It reminds you, this isn't it. This isn't you. So what's the alternative? Radical honesty? Tear off every mask? Shout your chaos into the street? Not exactly. Sartre isn't asking for performative rebellion. He's asking for awareness, for presence, for the courage to say, I don't know who I am yet, but I'm done pretending. To act not as a waiter or a friend or a genius, but as a human being in motion. That means risk. It means a contradiction. It means some days you won't recognize yourself. And that's good. Because the self is not a statue. It's a process. You are not a fact. You are a question. And the only honest answer is the life you choose to live. So next time you feel the mask slide into place, pause. Listen. Not to the applause, but to the silence beneath it. Ask yourself, who are you performing for? What part of you is being hidden? What would happen if you stepped out of the light? You'll never be what you pretend to be, but you can be something better. You can be what you choose, moment by moment, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it changes tomorrow, even if no one claps, because that's the only self that's real, the one that dares to be free. There is no God to forgive you. You've done things you regret, not dramatic things maybe. Maybe you didn't betray someone, maybe you didn't scream, maybe you didn't fall apart in public. But something inside you is stained. You feel it in the silence, in the mirror, in the strange distance between who you thought you were and what you've become. So you wait for a sign, for something to cleanse you, for a word, a force, a gaze beyond yourself that says, it's okay, you are forgiven, but it never comes. And that absence is not accidental, it's structural. Because as Sartre would say, there is no God to forgive you. This isn't blasphemy, it's not rebellion, it's an ontological statement. Sartre isn't trying to offend believers. He's trying to describe what it means to exist without appeal, without a higher court, without a final judge. He's saying, there is no ultimate eye watching you, no voice that will lift the guilt from your shoulders, no divine eraser waiting to clear your slate. There is only you and what you do next. At first, this sounds like despair, like abandonment, like a cruel universe. But listen deeper. It's not despair. It's liberation, if you're willing to bear its weight. Because if there is no God to forgive you, then your salvation is in your hands. Your redemption is not granted. It is created through action, through truth, through responsibility. And that's terrifying. But it's also the only honest path left. We spend so much time hoping for pardon, hoping that our intentions matter more than our effects, hoping that someone, somewhere, understands the reasons behind our choices and absolves us. But what if no one does? What if no one can? What if the universe doesn't speak the language of grace? What if it only echoes the choices we make? Not judging, not condemning, but recording silently. Sartre's world is not soft. It's not comforting. It doesn't promise rewards or punishments. It simply is. And in that raw isness, you are free, but also condemned. Because now everything you are is yours. You can't say, I was born this way. You can't say, I was made to do it. You can't say, God will understand. There is no divine ledger. There is only the world and your place in it. But what about guilt? What about shame? What about the aching feeling in your chest when you think of what you've done or what you failed to do? Those feelings are real. They're not errors, but they are yours. They are not imposed from above. They are not punishments. They are signs, not of sin, but of conscience, not of judgment, but of possibility. They remind you that you are not done, that you can still become. Because without a God to forgive you, there is no finished narrative, no final verdict. Every moment is open, every step is reversible, every silence can be broken. You are not damned, you are unfinished. And that is both the horror and the hope. You might long for forgiveness because you want to stop hurting. You want someone else to say, you are not that bad. But you don't need someone else to say it. You need to ask yourself a harder question. What will I do now? Not do I deserve to be forgiven, but how will I live with what I've done? Will you hide? Will you repeat? Will you pretend? Or will you change? Not for a reward, not to be loved, but because you are the only one who can. This is the nakedness Sartre offers. Not the cold, cynical void, but the exposed self, stripped of illusions. You are not watched. You are not known. You are not waiting for a score. You are free, and that freedom burns. It burns away the excuses. It burns away the hope for rescue. But in the ash, something new can emerge. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but authenticity. Because if there is no God to forgive you, then there is no one to lie to, no one to perform for, no one to impress. You don't have to kneel, you don't have to confess, you only have to act. And in acting, remake yourself. The past is not erased, but it is reclaimed, not through mercy, but through meaning. You carry your guilt not like a wound, but like a weight. And weights can be used. They can build muscle. They can build strength. If you carry them consciously, they become part of your shape, not your shame. You don't need to be pure. You don't need to be innocent. You only need to be honest about who you are, what you've done, and what you're going to do next. And yes, that's harder. It would be easier to be told you are forgiven, easier to believe that someone else holds the keys to your soul. But easier isn't better. easier isn't true. The truth is, you are alone with yourself, and that doesn't mean you are unloved. It means your love for yourself, for others, for the world, is not validated by anyone else. It is born in action, in choice, in courage. So no, there is no God to forgive you. But there is a world to return to. There are people to face. There are words to say. There is work to do. And there is time, not to erase the past, but to outgrow it. You are not beyond saving. You were never condemned. You were simply misunderstood, even by yourself. And now, maybe for the first time, you can begin to understand not what it means to be forgiven, but what it means to live without needing to be. You are what you choose, and that's terrifying. You think you are something. You say, I'm a calm person. I'm not like them. I don't panic. I don't lie. I don't give in. You say I have principles. I have taste. I have a past that shaped me and a nature that defines me. But under it all, when the room is quiet and the lights are low, a deeper truth waits. You are not what you are. You are what you choose. And that is far more terrifying than it sounds. Because if you are what you choose, then everything you are is built moment by moment, gesture by gesture, decision by decision. You are not born with a meaning. You do not carry a soul that whispers who you are meant to be. There is no essence under the noise. There is only action. And from that action, identity emerges. Sartre doesn't say this to inspire. He says it to expose, to peel back the skin of your self-image and show what lies beneath. Not fate, not character, but responsibility. Think about it. Everything you admire in yourself, your kindness, your courage, your insight, is not a gift, it's a choice. And everything you regret, your cruelty, your fear, your silence, is also a choice. Not always conscious, not always clear, but a choice nonetheless. You are not the victim of your own mind. You are its maker. Even your habits, your addictions, your patterns, they persist because on some level you allow them to. You enable them. You feed them. But the world loves to tell you otherwise. It whispers that you are fixed, that your past defines you, that your trauma excuses you, that your nature is immutable, that you are a type, an archetype, a label, a profile. But none of that is true. Or rather, it becomes true only when you choose to let it. Because identity is not something you discover. It's something you construct. And construction is constant. That's what makes freedom so horrifying. Not because you can do anything, but because you can never stop choosing. Even when you think you're doing nothing, you're choosing to do nothing. Even when you freeze, you choose not to act. Even when you surrender, you choose your chains. And if you are what you choose, then you are never innocent. Not fully, not finally. That's the real burden. Not guilt, but authorship. You are writing your life in real time. There are no rehearsals, no drafts, no backspace. Every moment is ink. Every gesture is canon. And you cannot claim later that you were not the writer. You may have been scared, tired, pressured, but you held the pen. And what happens when you stop choosing? When you coast? When you copy? When you play a role you didn't invent? Then someone else chooses for you. Or worse, no one does. You become an echo, a shadow, a hollow thing repeating gestures it doesn't understand. Sartre called this bad faith, when you pretend that you are not free, because freedom is too much to bear. When you say, "I'm just doing my job, I'm just being polite, I'm just following the script," but there is no script, and there is no just. You are always creating yourself, and that creation is terrifying because it is infinite. You are never done. You never arrive. You are not a product. You are a process, and that process demands attention. Not perfection, not purity, just presence. You must show up to your own life. You must admit that what you do is who you are, even when you hate it, even when it hurts. That's not to say you are alone. Other people matter. The world matters. But even in the face of all that, you choose, you respond, you interpret, you act. And that acting defines you. Not your thoughts, not your dreams, not your regrets, only your choices. And this terrifies people. It terrifies you. That's why we cling to stories. Stories of destiny, stories of identity, stories of sin and salvation. We want to believe that we are something before we act, so that we can blame what we are for what we do. But Sartre flips the formula. You do not act because of who you are. You are who you are because of how you act. Being follows doing. There is no excuse in your essence. So the question is no longer, who am I? But what am I doing? Because your choices are the only mirror that doesn't lie. And if you don't like what you see, you must act differently. Not wait, not pray, not explain. Just act. You are what you choose. And that means you are never safe, never settled, never solved. But it also means you are never stuck, never condemned, never finalized. Each day is a redefinition, each silence a sentence, each kindness a birth. You can choose to betray yourself, or you can choose to begin again, and again, and again, until what you are begins to resemble what you choose to be. Not because someone told you who to be. Not because a book or a voice or a rule defined you, but because you chose, and in choosing, you became. That is the terror. That is the truth. That is your freedom. The look that destroys you. You walk into a room. You don't say anything. You just enter. And someone looks at you, not for long, not with malice, just a glance, a passing flick of their eyes across your presence, and something inside you shifts. Your shoulders tense. You wonder how you're standing. You adjust your expression. You become aware of your hands, your clothes, your posture. You are no longer alone in yourself. You are now an object in someone else's world. You have become seen. And in that moment, you die a little. Jean-Paul Sartre called this the look, not just the physical act of being looked at, but the existential transformation that happens when another consciousness touches yours and casts you into the world of appearances. You are fluid, free, undefined, but under the look you harden. You become visible, solid, limited, and it burns. Because the look does something brutal. It steals your sovereignty. Before it, you were a subject. You existed from the inside, through your intentions, your doubts, your memories, your becoming. But now, you are something else. A shape, a face, a surface to be interpreted. You are no longer who you are. You are who they think you are. And worse, you can't stop it. You can't grab the look and force it to see you correctly. You can't control the image they form. You don't know if they see admiration, disgust, indifference. You don't even know if they're really thinking of you at all. But the fact remains, you exist now in their mind. And in their mind, you are fixed, trapped, defined. You have become a thing. This is not paranoia, it's ontology. The moment another person sees you, you are no longer alone in your definition. You become an object among objects, a body in space, a role in their narrative, even if they say nothing, even if they're kind, even if they love you. Love doesn't stop the look. In fact, it sharpens it. The people who love you see you most intensely. They form the most vivid image of you. And the more vivid the image, the more pressure you feel to live up to it, or to fight it, or to hide behind it. The look creates not just discomfort, it creates bad faith. You start acting to match what they see, or to subvert it. But either way, you're no longer free. You are responding, reacting, performing. The look doesn't need to be hostile to destroy. It just needs to be real. Because real vision, true contact between two consciousnesses, is invasive. It reaches into you and solidifies what was once soft. And so, you retreat. You put on masks. You pose. You smile the practiced smile. You become what they expect. And you lose yourself. But the irony is, you do the same to others. You look too. You turn people into roles, into faces, into impressions. You freeze them in your perception. You forget their complexity. You make them into props for your own script. And in doing so, you participate in the very violence you suffer from. This is the tragic reciprocity of being human. We are all subjects, but we make each other into objects. We are all trying to be seen, but we can never fully be known. And so we hover in a painful space, desperate to be recognized, but terrified of being misread. And this is why solitude can feel like relief. When no one is looking, you melt again, you breathe, you stretch, you become fluid once more. You return to your inner world. But even there, the ghost of the look lingers. You imagine others watching, judging, measuring. You carry their eyes inside your skull. You rehearse conversations. You defend yourself in imaginary courtrooms. You become your own surveillance. The look colonizes the self. It installs mirrors where there used to be windows. You begin to see yourself as they do. You judge your laughter. You audit your thoughts. You live not as a subject, but as a performance of identity. So what's the escape? Sartre doesn't offer comfort. He doesn't give us a way out. There is no pure state where we are untouched by others. Even in solitude, even in rebellion, we carry the scars of being seen. But he does give us awareness, and awareness is the first crack in the shell. When you become conscious of the look, you can begin to resist its tyranny. Not by erasing it, that's impossible, but by choosing how you respond. You can acknowledge the object you become without surrendering your subjectivity. You can say, yes, they see me, but they do not define me. You can act not to match their image, but to reclaim your agency. This is not easy. It means walking through the fire of exposure. It means letting people misunderstand you, letting them judge you, letting them reduce you, and choosing still to act from within, not from the surface. Because the look will always be there, in love, in work, in art, in silence. You will always be watched, measured, mirrored, but you do not have to be controlled by it. You can recognize its presence and still move, still speak, still choose, even if they see only a fraction of you. Even if they mock it, even if they love a version of you that isn't real. You can continue. You can remain a subject. And that, in Sartre's world, is the only true freedom. Not to avoid the look, but to look back, not with rage, not with fear, but with clarity. To say, you see me, but I am more than you can see. Because the truth is, the look does not destroy you. Not unless you let it. Not unless you forget that before you were seen, you were, and you still are. Existence comes before meaning. You were born into a world already moving, a world already speaking, labeling, categorizing, a world that tried to define you before you could even speak back. They gave you a name, a gender, a nationality, a set of expectations. They taught you the rules, the stories, the reasons why, but none of it was yours. You didn't ask for it. You didn't choose it. You just arrived, suddenly, brutally, and found yourself caught in a system that pretends to make sense. But what if it doesn't? What if all those meanings, all those roles, all those stories are just afterthoughts? What if you existed before they started trying to explain you? What if, as Jean-Paul Sartre said, existence comes before meaning? It sounds simple, but it overturns everything. You are not born with a purpose. You are not born to fulfill a plan. You are not the manifestation of some eternal blueprint. You are not a thing with essence baked into your bones. You are a presence, a question, an eruption. You are, and that's it. The meaning comes later, if it comes at all. This is not comforting. It's not supposed to be. You were raised to believe that life had meaning and that your job was to discover it, like a treasure hidden in a forest. But Sartre throws that idea into the fire. He says, there is no meaning waiting for you. There is only you waiting to create it. And that creation is terrifying. Because if nothing has meaning until you choose it, then every moment is blank. Every action is unanchored. Every word is a leap into the void. There is no guidebook, no holy script, no predetermined narrative arc. You are free, but that freedom is not light. It is a weight. It presses on you. It demands everything from you. You must write your meaning. Stitch it into time with your choices. You must define yourself not once, but always, continuously, tirelessly. Because the moment you stop choosing, you stop being. You become a ghost in someone else's script, a hollow character reciting lines that were never yours. But we don't want that kind of freedom. We want comfortable cages. We want roles. We want titles that explain us. We want to say, I am this, I am that. And in saying so, we try to escape the terror of the undefined. We want essence to come first. Because if essence comes first, then life is a process of unfolding, not inventing. Then you don't need to be responsible. You just need to be authentic. You just need to discover your truth, not create it. But Sartre says, that's a lie. There is no fixed truth inside you. There is no hidden self waiting to be unearthed. There is only a canvas, and you are holding the brush, whether you want to or not. That's why existence is brutal, because it precedes explanation. You live first, and only then does meaning trail behind you, like smoke from a fire you didn't know you lit. You act, and then you ask what it meant. You choose, and then you wonder who you are. And sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you choose badly. You become a version of yourself that you hate. You lie. You perform. You disappear behind the mask of approval, and then you feel the sickness, the quiet nausea of knowing you've betrayed your freedom. You've let others give you meaning, and now you are lost in it. But that too is a choice. You can reclaim it. You can say, I am not what they said I was. I am not the sum of my past. I am not the echo of their expectations. I am what I do now, what I build, what I say, what I love. Meaning is not given. It is made, and it is made through living. You don't need to have the answers. You don't need to know what it all means. You just need to begin, to act, to engage with the raw fact of your existence. Because existence is not something that happens to you. It's something you become through sweat, through doubt, through action. And yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's lonely. But it's also the only honest path. The only path that doesn't reduce you to a product or a role or a function. You are not a machine. You are not a narrative. You are a storm, a process, a question mark in motion. You may never find your meaning, but you will make it. In every gesture, in every silence you break, in every boundary you draw, in every act of kindness you refuse to regret. So when the night is quiet and you feel the weight of nothingness pressing in, remember this: you exist, and that comes first. Everything else is up to you. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not broken for not knowing. You are just standing at the edge of a world that has never told the truth. And the truth is, there is no meaning until you give it one. There is no you until you choose to be. There is no purpose until you create it. Existence comes before meaning, and that is terrifying, but it's also the beginning of everything real. You invent yourself every day, and it exhausts you. You don't begin the day as yourself. You awaken as a question, a formless presence stirring beneath blankets and breath. You lie there for a moment before memory and language flood in, and then instinctively, silently, you begin to rebuild the person you were yesterday. Not because you remember how, but because you must. Because the world does not wait for unfinished people. Because to leave the bed without a mask is to invite the cold wind of nothingness to touch your face. You reach for gestures, for thoughts, for fragments of routines. You decide, often without knowing you've decided, how you will speak today, what you will reveal, what you will hide, which version of your voice will be used, which laugh, which silence, which name. There is no guidebook, no returning blueprint, only improvisation, polished by repetition and fatigue. This is not performance. This is ontology. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free. Condemned, not gifted, not blessed. Because freedom is not light. It does not elevate. It does not give wings. It weighs. It crushes. It demands that you invent meaning in a world where there is none. And worse, it demands that you do so again and again and again. Not just once, not just in youth or crisis or love, every moment of every day until you die. There is no you that stands untouched beneath the noise. There is no self resting safely in the basement of your psyche, waiting patiently to be discovered. There is only the self you construct as a scaffolding around a void. Not a soul, but a structure. Not a destiny, but a trembling accumulation of choices and gestures and refusals. You invent yourself every day because you are not something. You are not given. You are not assigned. You are only possibility, breath, motion. And what you do defines what you are. You are your action, not your intention, not your longing, only your creation. And this terrifying truth is what eats at you in the hours before sleep. You feel it in the exhaustion that doesn't come from labor, but from existence itself. Not the tiredness of the body, but the weariness of self-maintenance. You are always constructing, always editing, always evaluating the coherence of your mask, the durability of your myth. You speak and hear yourself speaking. You watch yourself move through rooms. You observe the expressions on your face like a stranger reading signs in a foreign city. Who is this? You wonder. Who chose this tone, this posture, this reaction? You did. Even when you don't want to. Even when you're too tired to care. You cannot pause your being. There is no off switch. Even silence is shaped. Even solitude is performance. Even collapse is choice. And every time you fail to choose consciously, you delegate the invention of yourself to inertia, to memory, to others. But that too has a cost. You become what is expected. You become what is safe. You become the least offensive version of yourself. A dull echo of who you might have been. And that echo rings through your chest when you lie in darkness and feel nothing familiar inside. This is the exhaustion that Sartre left unnamed but ever present. The exhaustion of being both the sculptor and the stone, the creator and the raw material. You invent yourself not as a project with an end, but as a process without rest. You are your own labor. You are your own audience. You are your own judgment. And yet, you keep doing it. Even now, even while reading these words, you are calibrating your identity. You are deciding what this moment says about who you are. You cannot escape the task. You are the task. And sometimes you hate it. Sometimes you would give anything to dissolve, to not have to decide, to not have to maintain the delicate illusion of coherence, to be able to collapse into a self you did not have to build, to be forgiven for not being solid, to be loved without holding still. But you know that's not how it works. There is no essence before existence. There is no finished version of you hiding in the shadows. There is only the you that you build, word by word, silence by silence, gesture by gesture. You do not rest, not because you are ambitious, but because you are unfinished, not because you seek perfection, but because you cannot help but continue, even in despair, even in apathy, even in moments when you feel least like yourself. You are building something. And the truth is, that building is beautiful. Not in the romantic sense, not in the poetic sense, but in the raw, violent, exhausted truth of becoming. You invent yourself every day, not because you want to, because you must, because no one else can carry this weight for you. You feel it in your bones, in the heaviness behind your eyes, in the ache of pretending to be consistent when you are constantly becoming. You feel it in the tremble before you speak, in the pause before answering, "How are you?" with a lie that sounds enough like the truth to pass. And yet, you wake up. And again, you begin. And again you build. And again you endure the fragile architecture of identity. Because you exist. And existence demands invention. Not invention as fantasy, but as survival. Not invention as ego, but as the raw act of continuing. You invent yourself every day, and it exhausts you, but it also proves you're still alive, still moving, still choosing, still free. even if that freedom feels like a weight you never agreed to carry, even if you dream in secret of a self that doesn't need to be assembled, even if some part of you wishes you could simply be. You can't, and that is your curse. But it is also your only claim to truth. You are not finished, you are not fixed. You are not anything until you say, "This is who I am," and say it again and again and again, until your voice breaks, until the exhaustion becomes silence, and the silence becomes the next beginning. The absurdity of acting like life has a meaning. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you check your phone, you nod at people, you walk down hallways, streets, conversations. You say things like, "I'm fine, almost weekend, no worries." You perform rituals, you make plans. You pretend there's a script, a shape, a logic to it all. But somewhere underneath all this, in the silence, in the pauses, in the eyes of strangers, you feel it. The hollow ring behind the gestures, the echo of nothing, the absurd. Sartre didn't use the word absurd the same way Camus did, but he lived inside it. His philosophy drips with it, not as a scream, but as a long, slow exhale in a windowless room. We act as if life has meaning, but it doesn't. Not inherently, not objectively, not cosmically. There is no built-in reason for your alarm clock to go off, for your job to matter, for your voice to sound like it belongs in the world. You are a piece of matter. Self-aware, yes. Mobile, yes. But still, a thing in a spinning mass of other things. And you know this, even when you try not to. So why do we act like it matters? Because the alternative terrifies us. Because if life has no meaning, then everything we do, every gesture, every vow, every sacrifice, could dissolve the second we close our eyes. And that possibility is too vast, too cold. So we narrow our vision, we create little missions. We say this is important, we say this is who I am, we say this matters. We create fictions, not because we're liars, but because we're afraid of drowning in the silence of reality. But Sartre doesn't let us off the hook. He doesn't believe in external meaning. He doesn't believe in God-given purpose or destiny or deep moral maps printed on our DNA. He believes in existence, raw, unfiltered, unadorned. You are here. That's it. You're not here for something. You just are. And that is unbearable. So we play roles. We act as if we are the characters in a drama we didn't write but must now perform. We say, I'm a teacher, I'm a partner, I'm a citizen, I'm doing my best. We hang these labels on our chests like armor, but the absurd bleeds through. Because the absurd is not loud. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It hums beneath the fluorescent lights. It flickers in the mirror at 2 a.m. It stares back from the ceiling when your eyes won't close. It shows up when laughter rings hollow, when applause feels empty, when you win and it doesn't feel like anything. It shows up in success, in failure, in the flat plane of middle life. You keep going. You make lists. You send emails. You remember birthdays. You fill the day. Because stopping would be a confession. Stopping would mean admitting that there's no obvious reason to continue. But deep down, you know, the way you sometimes look at a tree or a piece of trash or a stranger's mouth moving and think, none of this is necessary. None of this has to be. But it is. And that contradiction, that tension, is what Sartre leaves you with. So what do you do? What do you do with the unbearable weight of meaninglessness? You choose. That's it. You choose anyway, you act as if, but not blindly, not passively. You acknowledge the absurd, and then decide to act anyway. Not because there is meaning, but because you are the one who gives it. There is no meaning until you invent it. That's the terrifying freedom. You can't rely on orders. You can't point to tradition. You can't lean on gods. You can't quote fate. You have to stand there in the dark, in the absurd, and say, "This is what I will be." And you do that again tomorrow, and again the day after. And yes, it's exhausting. It's easier to go numb, to let culture think for you, to drown in schedules, trends, jobs, ideologies. But the numbness doesn't save you. It just dulls the burn. The absurd doesn't go away. It just waits. And when you look too long at anything, it returns, the shimmering nothing behind the surface. So don't pretend life has meaning. Sartre would say that's bad faith. Instead, admit it doesn't. Admit the stage is empty, the script is blank, the audience is gone, and then perform anyway. Not for applause, not for legacy, but because action is the only way to be free. And freedom in this meaningless world is the closest thing we have to truth. To exist is to choose. To choose is to invent. And to invent in the face of absurdity is to be human. Not a puppet, not a shadow, but a flame burning without reason, without design, without promise. So the next time you feel like you're pretending, you are. But pretending isn't lying. Not if you know you're doing it. Not if you choose to do it with your eyes open. And if the world remains silent, if the universe offers no reply, then let that silence be your canvas. Paint meaning across it. Not because it's true, but because it's yours. You're the author of your own prison. You live inside walls you don't remember building. They surround you in silence. They shape your days, your words, your gestures. You press your palms against them when you think no one's watching. You wonder who built them. Your parents? Your past? Your fear? But if you listen carefully, if you trace each crack, each cold corner, each locked door, you'll see your fingerprints. Faint, layered, deliberate. You are the author of your own prison. It didn't happen all at once. You didn't sit down one morning and sketch out the blueprint of your confinement. It happened slowly, subtly. You said no to something small. You apologized when you meant to resist. You stayed quiet when you should have screamed. You smiled to avoid questions. And one by one, the bricks appeared. Little acts of avoidance. Little betrayals of what you needed, or loved, or believed. You thought you were surviving. You were. But you were also building. Sartre never said freedom was pleasant. He said we are condemned to be free, and that's not poetic. It means there is no external judge, no destiny, no blueprint, no fixed nature. Only your choices, your actions, your silence. And every time you act from fear, from habit, from the comfort of not choosing, you give shape to a structure that begins to enclose you. A cell made not of stone, but of compromise. This prison is not dramatic. It's ordinary. That's what makes it so effective. It's the job you no longer question, the relationship you perform instead of feel, the language you use to sound real when you're empty. It's the nodding, the scrolling, the pretending. And at night, when the world goes quiet, you hear it breathing around you. The echo of a space that shouldn't exist, that only exists because you allowed it to. But the worst part isn't that you're trapped. It's that the key is in your hand. Always has been. That's the sick joke of freedom. You are free even in your own captivity. You just don't want the cost. Because escaping would mean facing what you've avoided. It would mean burning what you built. It would mean becoming someone without a script. And that is terrifying. So you stay. And then you forget. You forget that the cell is optional. You start decorating it. You make it comfortable. You say, "This is just who I am." You say, "Not everyone gets to be free." You say, "It's not that bad." And the cell nods along. It agrees. It grows. But some nights it cracks. Some nights you feel it press in. Some nights you remember a version of yourself that wasn't afraid. A version that burned too brightly. A version you buried under years of adaptation. And for a moment the air grows thin. The walls shimmer. You want to move. You want to scream. You want to leave. But where would you go? Sartre would say, anywhere. Because there is no path, no right direction, no holy map. There is only the act of walking, of refusing the false comfort of immobility, of remembering that your identity is not a sentence. It is a draft, one that can be rewritten, rephrased, erased. But to do that, you have to admit something brutal. You have to admit that you built this, that the prison is not inherited or imposed or inescapable. It is authored, it is signed by you. And that's the beginning of freedom, not in escape, but in authorship. You cannot break the walls until you claim them. You cannot move forward until you say, "Yes, I stayed too long. I said yes too often. I silenced myself. I agreed to roles I didn't write." This is not confession. This is awakening. To see that your pain is shaped like your past decisions. To see that your loneliness is constructed from the absence of truth. To see that your numbness is a defense against the fire you once carried. But fire returns, if you let it. It starts as a tremor, as a refusal to nod, as a pause in the script, as the choice not to say, "I'm fine." It grows each time you act outside the prison's rhythm, each time you remember that the walls don't exist without your cooperation. Each time you choose from the inside, not from the blueprint. And slowly, the prison weakens. Not because you smashed it, but because you stopped feeding it. You stopped pretending. You stopped obeying. You stopped fearing the you that lives beyond the cell, and that you, trembling, loud, wild, begins to move. You are the author of your own prison, but you are also the author of your release. Not through magic, not through miracles, but through choice. And choice, Sartre reminds us, is the most dangerous, sacred, exhausting thing you can do. Because it means nothing is fixed, nothing is final, nothing is true unless you choose to make it so. You are not sentenced, you are self-written. The prison is a page, and you are still holding the pen. To exist is to obey something you don't understand. You were born without asking. You opened your eyes into a world that had already begun. The lights were already on, the rules already written, the machine already running. You didn't choose the language you heard, the hands that held you, the pain that waited. But from the very first moment, you moved. You reached. You cried. You obeyed. You don't remember the decision to begin existing because you never made it. And yet, you go on. Every breath, every beat, every blink is a submission to hunger, to instinct, to the shape of the body and the pull of time. To exist is not to be free. It is to follow commands that have no author, instructions that have no explanation. You move because something deeper than you demands movement. Schopenhauer saw this not as metaphor, but as structure. At the core of being he saw not reason, not purpose, but will. A blind, irrational force that compels all life to continue, expand, persist. Not your will, not a conscious "I want," but something prior to choice. Something that pushes the seed to grow, the animal to hunt, the human to crave. Something that does not ask, it orders. This will is not evil. Evil requires intention. The will is beyond intention. It is pure motion, pure demand. It does not know you, it does not care for you, but it animates you. And you cannot say no to it because it speaks before language. You are not its master. You are its medium. And so you eat, not because you love food, but because your body threatens collapse. You seek warmth, not for comfort, but to escape cold. You desire, not because desire is noble, but because stillness is punished. The will does not reward you. It avoids your death. And if you resist too long, it breaks you. With depression, with panic, with sickness. Resistance is not rebellion. Resistance is decay. Even your mind obeys. You think what you are allowed to think, what your past permits, what your biology filters, what your culture tolerates. Every idea arises inside a structure you did not build. Every conclusion is shaped by conditions you cannot name. Even your aha moments, even your most personal realizations, they were paths already laid out in the dark. You just followed the light. You believe in freedom because you feel friction. You say, I struggle, I choose, I fight. But so does a river crashing against rocks. So does fire devouring what stands in its way. Movement is not freedom. It is obedience to the laws of motion. And you too move by forces you mistake for selfhood. Ask yourself, what are you doing right now that is truly yours? What thought? What impulse? What plan? Trace it backwards. Where did it begin? Can you find the point where it emerged ex nihilo, untouched by memory, chemistry, pressure? Or was it always seeded, always inherited, always caused? This is not defeatism. It is exposure. You are not broken. You are revealed. To be conscious is to be aware of the strings, not to cut them. Schopenhauer's horror was not that life is hard. It's that life is governed by something you cannot know, cannot stop, and cannot escape. That behind every decision is not a self, but a mechanism. That behind every mechanism is not a God, but a question with no answer. Why do you wake up each day despite the weight? Why do you keep breathing despite the futility? Why do you keep hoping even when nothing changes? Not because you believe, but because you are being pulled. You obey without understanding. The world itself obeys, gravity pulls, matter condenses, stars burn, planets spin, nothing resists. And you are part of that movement. You are not above the universe. You are the universe folded into thought and still obeying its law. And when you suffer, when you fall apart, when you scream into the void, even then you obey. Pain is not a breakdown of the system. It is one of its languages, a method to control, a method to correct. The will does not speak in words. It speaks in urges, in tensions, in agonies. And you learn its grammar the hard way. Some try to rebel. They fast, isolate, meditate, renounce. But even that is obedience to another part of the will, the part that seeks distance, clarity, negation. There is no outside. There is only direction. So what remains? Awareness. To know that you are being moved, even as you move. To see the command, even as you follow it. To stop mistaking obedience for identity. You are not what you want. You are not what you chase. You are what observes the chase. This awareness is not escape. The will continues. The body continues. But now you see it. And in that seeing, a crack forms. A silence, a stillness between the commands. And in that stillness, something new appears. Not freedom, not truth, but lucidity. The light of a mind that no longer lies to itself. The peace of knowing, this is not mine. This is not me. This is the current, and I am watching it. You still obey. But now you know. You exist. And that means you obey something you do not understand. But now, at last, you understand that. Happiness is just a pause between pains. There are moments when you feel light, brief, quiet fragments when the weight seems to lift, when your chest is not tight, when your thoughts are not fighting. You smile, maybe. You breathe deeper. You say, I'm happy. But before you finish the sentence, the moment is already fading. The shadow returns. The tightness crawls back. The restlessness resumes. And you wonder, why is it never enough? Schopenhauer believed that happiness does not exist as a true state. Not in the way we imagine it, as destination, a condition, a resting place. He believed what we call happiness is simply a pause in suffering, a momentary gap between two waves of discomfort. You are not fulfilled, just briefly unburdened. And that moment feels divine, only because of what surrounds it. Lack, hunger, unease. To exist is to suffer, not because of misfortune or failure or personal tragedy, but because of the very structure of being. You are born into a body that needs, a mind that craves, a world that resists. You must eat, drink, sleep, connect, create. But nothing you obtain silences the need. The satisfaction never lasts. The will, as Schopenhauer called it, is never finished. It keeps demanding. Pleasure, then, is not a goal. It's a trick. A temporary weakening of the pressure, like the silence between sirens. You enjoy a meal not because you've gained something, but because the pain of hunger has been suspended. You feel joy in love not because you are whole, but because the loneliness has been quieted. Even the greatest highs are not heights, they are absences. Absences of the pains that rule you. And that's why happiness can never last, because pain is not the exception, it is the default. You're not falling out of paradise. You are returning to your natural condition. Discontent is not failure. It is the baseline. Think of how quickly pleasure decays. The object of desire, once attained, becomes ordinary. The success you longed for becomes your new normal. The affection you dreamed of becomes expectation. And then, boredom. And after boredom, restlessness. And after that, a new hunger. The pendulum swings again. Schopenhauer described life as movement between pain and boredom. Pain when you do not have what you want, boredom when you do. Both are forms of suffering. The first is sharp and obvious. The second is subtle and quiet, but no less corrosive, because it reminds you that even fulfillment cannot fulfill you. You get what you asked for, and it does not save you. And yet, you continue. You chase, you plan, you build, you hope. Because the will keeps you in motion. It uses desire as bait and pleasure as reward. But it does not care if you arrive. It only wants you to keep moving. It wants repetition, replication, persistence. Not your peace, your participation. This is why even those who have everything are not at peace. Because the will is not silenced by wealth or love or status. It simply shifts. It invents new lacks, new problems, new fears. The more you get, the more you must protect. The more you achieve, the more you must maintain. The will adapts. It is tireless. So where does that leave you? You are taught to believe in happiness, that it is your right, your purpose, your measure of success. You are told to pursue it, to maximize it, to curate your life around it. But what if happiness is not a goal, but a byproduct? What if it's not something to reach, but something that happens briefly when the storm pauses? You cannot build your life on pauses. You cannot construct meaning from gaps. But you can begin to see the pattern, to notice the machinery, to stop mistaking relief for salvation. When happiness arrives, you can feel it, but you no longer worship it. You no longer beg it to stay. You know it is passing through. And in its passing, you remain, not broken, not doomed, but lucid. This lucidity is not joy. It is not ease, but it is honest. It is the state of seeing clearly that the world will not deliver you from yourself, that peace will not come from outside, that fulfillment will always dissolve. And once you see this, you no longer run as fast. You no longer chase as blindly. You sit still longer. You listen more closely. You allow the moment to hurt. And when a pause comes, you feel it, not as reward, but as silence. And in that silence, there is room, not for happiness, but for rest. Because happiness is not the light. It is the absence of fire. It is not the reward. It is the gap in the punishment. It is not the goal. It is the accident. And once you understand that, you are not fooled. You are not saved. But you are not asleep. You are alive, inside the swing of the pendulum. And for a moment, you feel no pain. That moment is what the world calls happiness. You know better. Freedom is a word you use to describe your chains. You say you are free. You say you choose, that your life is yours, that your decisions reflect your values, your beliefs, your desires. You say you go where you want, love whom you want, become who you want. But who taught you to want what you want? Who shaped your values? Who handed you the structure inside which you believe you're making choices? Schopenhauer would not laugh at your freedom. He would mourn it. Because he believed that freedom, as we commonly understand it, is a decorated cage, a conceptual trick, a mask placed over necessity. You do not act freely. You act within the boundaries of forces you do not control and rarely even see. You obey, and then you call the obedience your will. From the outside, you may seem autonomous. You walk, you speak, you plan, but inside, you are pulled, not by reason, but by the will. That ancient blind force that lives beneath thought. It does not explain, it commands. It drives all living things to persist, to reproduce, to dominate, to continue. It lives through you, not for you. And when you feel desire, it is not your desire. It is the will expressing itself through your nervous system, pretending to be you. You think, I made a choice. but look closer. Why that choice? Why that impulse? Why now? Trace it backwards. Into childhood, into trauma, into instinct, into structure, into your biology, your ancestry, your species. Keep going. You will not find freedom at the root. You will find chains made of language, emotion, hunger, fear. You believe you could have done otherwise. That's what freedom often means. The idea that, at the moment of choice, you could have chosen differently. But this is an illusion born of hindsight. When the moment comes, you act, not because of a neutral possibility, but because all your past, all your structure, all your forces converge on that one act. You don't choose it. It emerges from you. And then your mind narrates it, justifies it, baptizes it as yours. This is the first chain, causality. You are a node in a web of cause and effect, a transient configuration of impulses, conditions, and reactions. You do not transcend the web. You are the web, folded into a body that says, I. The second chain is identity. You think you are a self, a stable center, a soul. But Schopenhauer saw the self not as a core, but as a surface, a shifting mask created by memory and repetition. What you call I is just the echo of what the will has done through you so far. It has no permanence, no sovereignty. It is not a pilot, it is a trace. And then there are the chains you do not see, the ones disguised as light, the social scripts, the inherited language, the silent rules you follow to be normal, to be good, to be successful. You work, you consume, you compete, you love. But none of these are your inventions. You are following blueprints designed to replicate the will in culture. You don't create meaning, you install it. You don't escape conditioning, you become it. Even rebellion is often obedience in disguise. You reject one system only to fall into another. You flee one master and find yourself bowing to a new one. The will has many costumes: ideology, desire, morality, even transcendence. And it does not care which one you wear, as long as you keep moving, striving, suffering. So what then? Are you a puppet? Schopenhauer did not say that you are nothing. He said you are not what you think you are. You are not free because you act. You are free only, if at all, in the rare moments when action ceases, when the will falls silent, when the craving pauses, when the need fades. In these moments, in deep aesthetic absorption, in quiet contemplation, in certain forms of renunciation, you are not driven, you are not used, you are not being pulled. But these moments are rare, and they are not achievements, they are absences. The will lets go briefly, and in that absence you feel something strange, not power, not glory, but stillness. And in that stillness you begin to see the bars. You are not free, but you are aware. And that awareness is not a key, but a window. It shows you the truth, that what you called freedom was just a well-decorated cell. And what of hope? The hope that one day you will break free, that you will be truly yourself? Schopenhauer was merciless. He said, hope is just the will reasserting itself. It tells you there's a prize ahead, a door, a path. But the path is circular. The prize is another mask. The door opens into another cell. So what remains? Silence. Not the silence of resignation, but the silence of lucidity. When you no longer mistake your chains for wings. When you stop calling the storm a choice. When you see yourself not as a hero in your own story, but as a flicker in the movement of something ancient, indifferent, and unending. In this silence, There is no triumph, but there is clarity. You still act, you still move, but you no longer believe the myth. You see the chains, you feel them, you trace their cold weight through your limbs, and you stop calling them freedom. To be alone is the only way to be free. You are never more yourself than when no one is watching, when the world falls away, the voices, the mirrors, the rules, and nothing remains but your breath, your thoughts, your silence. And yet most people fear that moment. They run from it. They bury it in noise, in company, in performance. Because solitude reveals what connection hides. The truth that you are bound not by walls, but by others. Schopenhauer understood that society is not freedom. It is choreography, a constant dance of masks, a ritual of mutual illusions. You say what is expected, you move where permitted, you become legible, and for that visibility, you pay in authenticity. You trade your raw self for an edited version, trimmed and dressed in acceptable desires. Every interaction narrows you. Even love, which promises freedom through connection, often deepens the chains. The more you care, the more you bind yourself. The more you are seen, the more you must maintain the image. And so you perform your love, your kindness, your joy, even your suffering, to remain coherent in another's eyes. You are no longer free to unravel. To be with others is to negotiate, to shape, to become. And in doing so, you slowly forget what you were before you had to be anything. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as a lack, but as a liberation. In solitude, the will loses its hooks. There are no lovers to impress, no rivals to defeat, no crowds to persuade. Your mind, unobserved, begins to quiet. It no longer fights to be understood. It no longer fears rejection. It simply is. And in that isness, you encounter something rare. Yourself. Not the self of identity, nationality, profession, name, but the deeper self, the witness, the pulse, the stillness beneath movement, a self unburdened by the performance of meaning, a self that does not need to be explained. But solitude is not peace by default. At first it is a storm. When you are alone, truly alone, the distractions fall, the cravings surface, the anxieties scream. You feel the hunger of the will more acutely. You feel your fragility, your insignificance. You are confronted by the full weight of existence without the cushion of company. And this is why so many avoid it. They mistake noise for connection, movement for vitality. But what they are escaping is not loneliness. It is the confrontation with the real. In solitude, your illusions die. You are no longer the character you curated. You are the animal behind the eyes, and you begin to see how much of your life was spent fleeing that recognition. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. That is chaos. That is impulse. That is slavery to desire. True freedom is the ability to not do what you are driven to do, to pause, to sit, to witness. And that capacity is born in solitude, because only when no one is watching can you stop pretending. Only when you are not being mirrored can you stop adjusting. Only when you are alone can you begin to untangle the chains you've called identity. This is not a call to abandon others. Schopenhauer did not say love is worthless. He said it is costly. He said it binds you to the will more tightly than anything else. And if you cannot see that, if you cannot name the cost, you are not in love. you are an illusion. To be free, you must know what enslaves you. And nothing enslaves more subtly than approval. So you sit in solitude. You feel the ache, you feel the boredom, you feel the fear. And then something breaks. Not loudly, quietly, like a chain slipping from flesh. And for a moment you are not becoming, you are being. No one is asking anything of you. You do not need to make sense. You do not need to make progress. You do not need to be useful or desirable or coherent. You are simply there. And that is the beginning of freedom. It will not last. The world will return. The will reassert itself. But now you know. There is a space beneath the noise, a place that does not require performance, and you can return to it. Not always, but enough. Enough to remember who you were before you were watched. Enough to breathe without explanation. Enough to be free, not as a citizen, not as a partner, not as a success, but as a consciousness, resting in its own light. Because in the end, all the promises of freedom collapse when others enter. Every bond is a compromise, every role a restraint. But when you are alone, utterly and completely, you own nothing. You can be still, you can be silent, you can be free. The world is just your representation. Nothing else exists. You are not in the world. The world is in you. This is not a metaphor. It is the oldest metaphysical suspicion dressed in modern clothes. The ghost that haunts every philosopher who dares to ask, what do I actually see? What am I actually in? Schopenhauer did not invent this terror. He only made it impossible to ignore. What you call the world is not the thing you believe it is. It is not an external stage, a planet, a physical environment. It is a set of appearances, representations that arise only within you. What you see, hear, touch, and think is not the world itself. It is your mind's interpretation, your inner translation of something that remains forever beyond reach. This is what it means to say the world is your representation. Every time you open your eyes, your brain renders a hallucination that feels stable. Every time you speak, your language folds infinity into manageable symbols. Every time you remember, you rewrite. You never interact with the thing in itself. You never encounter reality raw. You only ever meet your own version of it. There is no such thing as objective perception. Even the simplest sense, the color red, the weight of a stone, the sound of a breeze, is not out there. It's in here. It is inside the mind that organizes the chaos into usable impressions. Space is not a container in which you live. Time is not a river that flows around you. They are both internal conditions that shape the way you experience what otherwise would have no shape at all. You are trapped not in a world, but in a mode of representation. You are looking at an interface. The world is a simulation created by your cognitive machinery, and the tragedy is not that it's false. The tragedy is that you can never see anything else. You are condemned to subjectivity. You are the prisoner of your own nervous system, and the bars are made of meaning. There is a comforting lie that says, behind all these representations, there is something real, something true, firm, and enduring. But how do you know? Can you ever step outside your own perception to verify what lies beneath it? Number. That's the absurdity. Even your doubt about the world's reality is part of your representation. Even your suspicion is staged on the same theater set. You do not know the world. You only ever know your mind's picture of the world. Schopenhauer didn't stop there. He pushed further. He said, "Not only is the world just your representation, but the only thing more real than it is your own will, blind, irrational, always desiring. Everything else is a shadow. Your thoughts, puppets of the will, your values, scripts written by the will, your suffering, a symptom of the will's endless hunger. But in this specific meditation, we remain in the visual realm. You are surrounded by a reality that is not real. It is a projection, a necessary illusion, a veil. And the most terrifying part is that there is no one behind the curtain. Not for you, not for me. Look around. The objects in your room, the chair, the light, the wall, are not what you think they are. They are mental constructions, not real in themselves, but real in you. When you leave the room does not remain as it was. You leave the representation, and it ceases to appear. This is not solipsism, this is structure. The structure of experience is bound to the subject, you. The world is not a thing. It is a process that unfolds within your subjectivity. When you dream, the dream feels like a world. When you hallucinate, the image feels real. When you believe, the belief becomes a cage. And so too with what you call waking life. Just because the simulation is consistent does not mean it is objective. Schopenhauer wants you to stop trusting appearances, not because they're lies, but because they are all you will ever have. You can polish them, analyze them, deny them, but you cannot exit them. Even your rejection of them occurs within them. You are not trapped in the world. The world is trapped in you. Think of the times you've tried to wake up, to pierce through the illusion, maybe through meditation or despair or substances. For a moment, perhaps, it seemed like the veil was thinning, but the veil was simply replacing itself with a subtler version. You cannot escape your own conditions of experience. You are the architect and the prisoner at once. And this insight is not liberation. It is vertigo. The more you realize that you cannot touch anything outside yourself, the more the illusion of contact burns away. You reach out, but you only ever touch your own glove. You scream, but the echo comes from inside the skull. The world smiles, but it is your nervous system that painted that smile. And if the world is only your representation, then every horror, every joy, every face, every memory was you, is you, will always be you. You are never looking out a window. You are always looking in a mirror. The more you understand, the less you can endure. Understanding is not a comfort. It is not a light that warms the soul or makes the world easier to bear. It is a blade, a slow-acting poison, a mirror that refuses to flatter you. The more you understand, the less you can pretend, and the less you can pretend, the harder it becomes to function. Schopenhauer knew this. He knew that knowledge was not freedom. It was exposure. To understand the world is to see its machinery. To see the machinery is to recognize its cruelty, its indifference, its repetition, its futility. To understand deeply is to see that there is no hidden order waiting to reward you for your efforts. No moral arc, no karmic balance, no secret harmony. Just the will, blind and restless, grinding forward through every form of life, using each creature as a tool to prolong its own hunger. And once you see that, once you truly see it, how do you keep going? Ignorance is not bliss, but it is insulation. The child can smile because it doesn't yet know what smiles conceal. The fool can chase love because they have not yet seen how desire disfigures what it touches. The crowd can cheer because they do not hear the silence between the words. But the one who understands, they see the thread beneath the tapestry. They see that beauty is transient, that joy is rented, that love is tethered to loss. They see the scaffolding behind every moment, the decay behind every bloom. The more you understand, the more invisible you become to others. You stop believing in the scripts. You stop playing the roles. You speak in a way that unsettles because you no longer feed the collective illusion. And so you are pushed to the margins, not out of cruelty, but out of reflex. The world protects its narrative. It rejects what does not serve the will. Understanding alienates, not because it is arrogant, but because it does not soothe. It asks questions that have no answers. It stares into the pit and does not look away. It whispers truths that cannot be monetized or marketed or neatly resolved. And yet people say knowledge is power. Schopenhauer would disagree. Knowledge is a wound. It does not empower you to escape. It sharpens your awareness of the cage. It shows you that the bars are made not of iron, but of perception, of instinct, of the very things that make you human. And once you understand that, you do not hate the world. You mourn it. You mourn the child who will learn to suffer. You mourn the lovers who do not yet know they are temporary. You mourn the self that must pretend in order to remain functional. Because to see clearly is to suffer cleanly. No more lies, no more distractions, just the architecture of pain revealed. And yet understanding is not despair. Not entirely. There is something else, something quieter, a kind of lucidity, a kind of dignity. To suffer knowingly is not the same as to suffer blindly. There is a strange freedom in naming the trap, a strange clarity in watching the performance from the wings instead of the stage. But it costs you. It costs you the ability to be casual, to be cheerful, to enjoy what others enjoy in the way they enjoy it. You see too much. You feel too much. The membrane between you and the real has thinned. You begin to notice how language distorts, how hope betrays, how desire colonizes, how even kindness can be a mask, and still, you must live. You must eat. You must speak. You must nod and smile and answer the question, "How are you?" without mentioning the scream in your chest. Because the world rewards function, not insight. But insight cannot be undone. Once you see, you cannot unsee. And so you live with it, like a shadow, like a second spine. You carry the weight of clarity. You learn to speak half-truths. You learn to translate your vision into something others can survive. And on rare nights when the world is quiet, you allow yourself to weep. Not from weakness, but from saturation, from the unbearable density of meaning, from the grief of knowing what most will never name. This is not a call to ignorance. Schopenhauer was no friend of illusion, but he understood the cost. He understood that to understand is to suffer, and to suffer without illusion is to suffer honestly. And in that honesty, perhaps, there is a final kind of grace. Not peace, never peace, but clarity. And in clarity, a kind of stillness. You do not escape the will, but you stop mistaking it for your voice. You do not escape the world, but you stop pretending it is your home. You do not escape suffering, but you stop bargaining with it. You carry it, you observe it, and sometimes you turn it into art. Because if nothing else, understanding allows you to transmute pain into pattern, into shape, into expression. And in that, perhaps, the suffering becomes not less, but known. And to know the shape of your pain is, in a small way, to endure it, even when nothing else can be endured. Art is the moment when the will is silent. There is something strange that happens when you listen to music you love, or when you stand before a painting that doesn't explain itself, or when you become absorbed by a scene in a film, or a sculpture, or a poem whose meaning escapes you, but whose presence feels undeniable. Time stops. You stop. For a moment, you are not thinking about yourself. You are not wanting, you are not lacking, you are not pushing or pulling or calculating. You are simply there, and the thing in front of you is simply there, and nothing else matters. Schopenhauer saw this moment for what it was, a brief silence in the storm of the will. The will, that primal force, blind and restless, that drives all things to strive, to hunger, to repeat. It does not ask. It demands. It pushes life forward, always toward more control, more pleasure, more escape from pain. It never stops. It lives in you, as desire, as fear, as anxiety, as the gnawing need to be somewhere else, someone else, something else. It is the engine of becoming and the root of all suffering. But in art, something changes. The will is not defeated. That would be too easy, too final. Instead, it pauses. It holds its breath. In the presence of true aesthetic experience, the will forgets itself. And for a few seconds, maybe minutes, maybe longer, you are no longer a creature of need. You become, in Schopenhauer's words, a pure subject of knowledge. That is, you see without wanting, you contemplate without reaching, you witness without absorbing. The world becomes object, not in the sense of possession, but in the sense of form. It is no longer here to serve you, to tempt you, to threaten you. It simply is, and you too simply are. This is not escape, it is exposure. Art does not distract you from the world. It reveals the world beneath your craving. It reveals the shapes, the patterns, the eternal structures that the will normally tramples over in its blind march forward. The curve of a wave, the fall of light on stone, the trembling in a human voice, the emptiness in an abandoned room. These things have no function. They do not help you survive, and that is why they save you. Because for a moment, you are not trying to win. In this way, art is not pleasure. It is clarity. It does not make you feel good. It makes you feel free. Free not in the sense of control, but in the sense of absence. The absence of pressure, the absence of demand, the absence of becoming. And in that absence you see the world differently. Not as battlefield, not as project, not as test, but as image. And you are not its master, you are its witness. Art, for Schopenhauer, was the only true redemption in a world otherwise ruled by suffering. Not because it fixed anything, but because it offered a way to stand outside the machinery, to look without being used, to look without needing. The greatest art, he believed, was music, because music does not represent anything. It is not about anything. It simply is, a sequence of sounds that mirror the structure of the will itself, and yet allow you to see it from the outside. When you are lost in music, you are no longer trying to be anyone. You dissolve. Your boundaries blur. Your story fades. There is no past, no future, no plan. Only tone, motion, tension, and release. And within that dissolution, there is stillness. It is not peace. Peace is still a function of desire, a desire for quiet. What Schopenhauer speaks of is more radical. It is indifference, not apathy, but liberation from craving. A moment when you no longer want anything because you no longer remember that you wanted. Art gives you that moment, not because it is beautiful, but because it is useless, because it does not serve the will, and because in that non-service it silences it. The will cannot speak in front of art. It forgets its script. It becomes a listener for once. And when the will is silent, you hear something else, something quieter than thought, deeper than emotion, older than time. You hear the world without you, and yourself without the world. That is why art matters, not because it decorates life, but because it reveals what life is when stripped of function, when stripped of need, when stripped of pain. You cannot stay in that state. It fades. The will always returns. The hunger wakes up. The story begins again. But now you know there is a place beneath it, a space where you do not want, where you do not become, where you simply see, where the world exists briefly, not as a trap, but as a shape. And in that shape, you rest, not forever, just long enough to remember that silence is possible. And that silence, too, is part of you.